With HTML5, CSS is now the method to use to not only style your website, but also to design the layout. Here is an example of a web page with some text, an image, and a video. A browser will render the elements in the window based on how they are entered in HTML. The HTML code is read from the top down, and the elements are displayed in the browser window according to the order they appear in the code. If I move the image, it will reposition itself according to the new location in the code. But it isn't a good idea to list the elements on a web page. Instead, it is customary to use floats. Floats can be used to direct the text where to reside, left or right. There is also an option to set float to none so that it will float as default according to its position in the HTML code. That can be useful if you are using floats before and after that element and want to turn off the float temporarily. The last option is to inherit the float property of its parents. Adding a float will change its position as seen when I set the navigation to float left. The other elements, however, will then continue to display at the end of the floated element in the order they are in the HTML code. There are different ways of handling this type of situation, but depending on what you are trying to achieve, it may be best to put the other page elements in a single div and then set a left margin so the flow of those elements will be more consistent and more manageable. Navigation bars or menu bars usually appear either at the top or on the left side of the screen. The items on a nav element are links to other pages, so they are set up as anchor tags. Although the elements are typed in rows in the HTML code, they still appear side by side in the browser window due to the standard flow property. To force them to display vertically instead of horizontally, first float them left, then change them to an unordered list. By default, an unordered list will display in a vertical format, and you can then add padding around the list items to give them more space. One feature of anchor tags in standard text is that the text will display in blue and will be underlined by default so that it is easy to see the text as a hyperlink. To keep the hyperlink functionality but remove the standard formatting, just add a CSS property to the nav anchor items to set the text decoration to none. You can then change the color of the different link states by using pseudo-classes. A pseudo-class breaks down an anchor tag into different stages: unvisited, visited, and hover. Several properties can be applied to each pseudo-class so that the link will function differently depending on which state the link is in. Notice how the links change text color and background color when I hover on them and then after clicking one. One other way of controlling the layout of a page is by using the position property. Any element can be placed by using the position property set to either static, fixed, relative, or absolute. Static is the default layout based on its location in the HTML code. Fixed will force an element to be in a specific position even when the page is scrolled. Relative will allow you to position an element so that it moves along in relation to the normal flow. If you set a left position, for instance, it will always be that distance from the items surrounding it. With absolute positioning, you can specify a definitive position that the element will always maintain regardless of the size of the browser window or the location of the items around it. Adding code to design the layout of a site can be quite tricky. Thoughtfully plan out the elements of your page on paper or digitally, and consider what you want to happen in different scenarios. Then think about each element on the page and how it will be affected. Include comments using the **** technique to help you remember what is happening throughout your code and to label sections of code and its purpose. Just remember you can always make changes if it isn't what you expected.